Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to the Rewilded Wellness Podcast. I don't know about you guys, but I have been soaking up this delicious magical Leo season and all the glorious sunshine. This past Sunday, I got to visit Barefoot Botanicals Farm in Doylestown, PA for their You Pick Day. And I went into this gorgeous field of berries and flowers and herbs and just picked to my heart's content. I picked aronia berries, which is my first time experiencing them. Um, and oh my goodness, elderberries for sure. I got to get some lemongrass. There was a lot of wild elements there as well that we were allowed to pick for free, which was super cool. So I got a lot of red clover and self-heal. I also picked some yarrow and echinacea flowers and lavender, passion flower. um, and there's probably something I'm forgetting. But it was a delightful experience, and I came home feeling very full of sun and joy and excited. And yesterday I made an aronia berry elderberry syrup with some echinacea and lavender mixed in. And then I made a beautiful infusion with some of the similar elements. I think it was aronia berry, the echinacea, lavender, some alfalfa, which I already had. I might have put in a little bit of ginger and some passion flower. And it ended up being this really lovely infusion, which was exactly what my body needed as I started my menstrual cycle yesterday, right? So this is like the kind of terrain work in action. Um, so lovely. It's just, listening to what your body needs, flowing with it, letting nature kind of show you as well, working with the season. And I was sitting with this thought the other day. You know that quote, the wound is where the light enters you? I'm sure you've heard it. And I think that's where a lot of people are stuck, right? Like in their wounding right now. But what if the wound is also where the light emanates back out from you? What if we walked around knowing that about ourselves? This is where I feel like I'm out of my journey. This, guys, this is what it makes it all worth it. Um, and I've just been thinking about, how we've all been conditioned to swim upstream against our bodies instead of flowing with them, right? Modern life has us fighting everything, our sleep cycles, our hunger cues, our natural rhythms, right? We're constantly essentially overriding our body's wisdom instead of listening to it just to fit in the modern paradigm, right? And this shows up everywhere in health. We get symptoms and immediately think, what's wrong that I need to fix? Instead of, what is my body trying to communicate to me, right? And so then we get into this whole chase root causes, pile on supplements, jump from practitioner to practitioner, right? It's all swimming upstream against what our body is actually asking for. And I see this all the time. I've been there. This is me, but I see this all the time with clients. And it's in the collective, right? And people are coming to me personally exhausted from fighting themselves. They've been trying so hard to force their body into compliance, right? Using this test to find out why this symptom is happening, or taking this thing for that symptom, or, avoiding foods, doing a targeted protocols for XYZ PDQ issue, right? And it's more like a battle, right? It ends up becoming like a war with yourself. And recently I made a decision, in my own way. This clarified this for me yet again. I realize I can no longer work with people who are on pharmaceutical medications. It just dilutes the work because we're trying to bridge two completely different paradigms. One that sees the body as broken and needing to be controlled, and one that trusts the body's innate wisdom. When someone is heavily medicated, we can't hear what their body's actually saying. The medications are overriding the signals, and it's like trying to have a conversation with someone while music is blasting, right? You might catch bits and pieces, but you're missing the full message, right? Um, this decision kind of scared me at first, but then I realized this is what flowing downstream looks like. This is me choosing to work with the current instead of against it. And what's been teaching me the most about this year has been my garden. This year I grew a full-fledged garden. I've never really had an opportunity to grow a garden quite like this before. It's just been little micro gardens or helping my dad at a community garden plot or just being a farm member and helping with that garden, right? This year it was all me. And it became this incredible teacher about flow versus force. Um, I planted the seeds, I gave them what they needed, and then I waited. Gosh, that's really hard. I'm not gonna lie, it wasn't easy. I was watching that ground like a hawk. But I did let nature do what nature does. And there were moments, I wanted it to hurry up. I was like, "How can we make this happen faster?" Right? But every time I just trusted and waited, and eventually things just flourished in their own timing. And, I found it to be this beautiful opportunity to have a meditative space where I would go out every morning and instead of like being impatient, I would just sit there in the garden space and maybe pull some weeds, stand there and just observe the land. And the pulling the weeds, there weren't really that many, quite frankly, and I didn't have to pull them. But it really just felt like this meditative, connective, spiritual practice, if you will. And, it's funny because I had had a conversation with a woman about my garden, and she was like, Ah, all the weeding you have to do just to have a garden. And I was like, gosh, I don't really see it that way, right? It's a completely different energy the way that I'm looking at the garden. It's a joy to me. Um, and it's been hitting me more and more. We all have really lost our joy around the most basic life-giving activities. Even people telling me that they don't enjoy cooking. Um, or even that eating feels like a chore, right? Like, so everything has become a resistance instead of a natural outpouring, a natural flow. Everything that's basic for human health, the basic fundamentals, there's just this massive disconnect and resistance around in the modern world. And my garden has just been really teaching me what happens when you work with natural systems instead of against them. Now, I'm not saying everything was wrinkle-free or perfect. I definitely had some plants that didn't do as well as they could have, right? Like, some produced and then petered out quicker than I expected. I overcrowded some things and they didn't stuff, that was growing nearby didn't have what it needed to grow, right? Like definitely had a few deer munchings on some of my plants. But they didn't wipe the whole thing out, right? Some plants definitely lost their vibrancy and needed a little love. But here's the thing. When I added the appropriate amendments to the depleted plants, they came back to their potential. It wasn't about diagnosing what's wrong with them or finding their root cause. It was just more about observing what they needed and nurturing them back to health. Right. And honestly, the majority of the garden was flourishing and happy because the foundational conditions were good. Right. Like the majority of what the plants needed was sun, right? Enough light, water, enough water, and enough nutrients in the soil. Like, that's the majority of the work, right? Like, these very basic elements. And even with the minor challenges that did arise, I've had plenty of food to harvest. It's been amazing. And it's funny too, because every time I talk about my garden to anyone, the first thing people say is, well, what about the animals? They're like so focused on what might go wrong that they couldn't see all the abundance that was possible. And I feel like, people won't even start something because they're worried about how it might get ruined. And this is exactly how we approach our bodies. We're so focused on what might be wrong, what might attack us, what problems we need to prevent that we forget to create the foundational conditions for thriving. And this just brings me to what I call beyond the rabbit hole thinking. We've gotten so deep into the health rabbit holes that we've forgotten how to come back up for air and see the bigger picture. And I see people who have been allopathizing holistic health, right? Like taking that same medical model of find the problem, fix the problem, and just apply it to functional medicine. And they're still chasing root causes, still trying to kill things, still at war with the body. And I want to give you an example. I have a 49-year-old woman who the previous approach had her on a bunch of hormone precursors after looking at hormone labs. And the approach was more to kind of like fix those imbalanced hormone panels versus understanding the deeper terrain and her current life adaptation story, right? And something in her felt like this approach wasn't quite right. And when she came to me, her number one complaint was inflammation. And the way it showed up in her body was multiple ways. She had joint issues, headaches, difficulty with her vision, appetite issues, her belly feeling inflamed on and off with no rhyme or reason, bowels on and off too, like, enough to get her noticing, right? Nothing extreme, but enough discord in her system that she was feeling the chaos within herself, but couldn't quite pinpoint it all. And she was tired of needing like constant chiropractic adjustments when she would get headaches. She really just wanted to understand what was going on in her system. So we looked at her hair test and her biome effects. And we got to see what her terrain was telling us. So her hair tissue mineral analysis showed inflammation markers where like the NAK ratio, sodium potassium ratio, was 10 times normal. And then her calcium to potassium ratio, her thyroid metabolism marker, if you will, was 10 times normal, right? Then the zinc to copper ratio, which is a hormone and energy regulation marker, was 2.5 times normal, right? So these ratios, they don't just mean imbalanced minerals. They show a body that's been fighting systemic inflammation for at least months, if not probably years, right? And so her hair mineral analysis showed us these clues, right? The zinc copper imbalance to me revealed some level of immune system, I'm going to say burnout, but like immune system struggle, right? Like, and to me, it explained why when she got a tick bite just 2 months into our work together, it got really inflamed and an infection hit her body so hard. Right, her body, had to work really hard to mount an appropriate immune response. And then that sodium potassium imbalance showed inflammatory overwhelm with this more high stress response to match, right? So her cells were stuck in what we call cell danger response phase 2, right? That chronic inflammatory phase where metabolism slows, immunity falters, and the limbic system stays locked in threat detection mode. And then here's the kicker. Her biome effects test confirmed a lot of what the minerals were telling us, right? She was producing 318 times normal levels of methane gas. Let me say that again, 318 times. right? So that also explains to me why she had such a sky high NAK ratio, which is this extreme inflammation in the body. And this explains the sleep issues, the digestive problems, the brain fog, struggling to find her words. Her gut was literally producing toxic gases that were already her already overwhelmed system was having to deal with, right? And she was missing almost all of her keystone species. And those are the functional bacteria that create an environment that's unfriendly to the pathogenic bacteria, right? Um, and it also allows the beneficial microbes to thrive. Now, when those keystone species are missing, when they're gone, it's kind of like the neighborhood watch disappears and all the troublemakers can move in. And her toxic metabolite levels were sky high. She had ammonia, hydrogen sulfide, P-creosol, all compounds that burden the liver and affect neurological function. So this explains the vision issues, the headaches, the difficulty processing information. Now, here's what's beautiful about this approach. We had her complete terrain map. So when life happened, and it always does, we don't just do this work and then everything is smooth sailing because we decided we're going to do it now. It's going to be perfect, right? We weren't flying blind, right? Before we started working together, she had been on antibiotics. I can't remember what it was for, a tooth, something in her mouth. Then 2 months in, the tick bite happened, and then she ended up on a month-long course of antibiotics. Now, instead of panicking or starting over, we were able to support her through it because we understood her foundational terrain and we knew exactly what we were dealing with and could maintain basic support that her system could handle. Oh, excuse me. And this is why I love working with the minerals and microbes simultaneously, meaning these two tests, the HTMA and the biome effects, right? You really can't address one without the other, right? The mineral chaos can create the gut terrain that also allows problematic bacteria to flourish. And then the gut dysfunction can also perpetuate the mineral imbalances. It's like both and it's not one or the other, right? So it can be kind of this it can be a vicious cycle, really, and it requires addressing both simultaneously. Right. So a lot of practitioners have looked at all these things in isolation through individual testing, right? They'll run a specific test and try to fix the area of the body, which is what the approach that was being taken with her prior, like looking at a hormone panel, but not really understanding why the terrain led to these dysfunctions in the first place, right? Or even just looking at minerals only and trying to supplement without addressing the gut inflammation that's preventing the absorption. So when you see both together, you get more of a complete story and you understand not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And most importantly, you have a roadmap for restoration instead of just symptom management. Now we can think about what all this could mean energetically. When your gut is producing 318 times the normal toxic gases, which no amount of toxic gas should be normal, right? This technically should be zero. Your minerals show like a level of chaos. The internal pressure is enormous. Right? So the nervous system is going to constantly be trying to manage this internal storm, right? So it's no wonder she couldn't get comfortable in her bed and she tossed and turned, ended up trying to sleep in different. I mean, she would tell me the stories of how she's trying to sleep through the night. She keeps changing positions, rooms, temperature, like all these things, trying to figure out how to sleep, right? Her body's literally looking for relief from the pressure within. And this can show up emotionally too, right? When you're carrying this much internal chaos, everything feels overwhelming. Decision making becomes harder. You might feel like you can't trust your own body or your instincts because the signals are just so scrambled. And when you're in this state of chronic inflammation and cellular stress, old emotional patterns and conflicts can get stuck in the system, right? The body just doesn't have the resources to process and move through things the way it normally would. Everything gets backed up physically, emotionally, energetically, right? And of course, at age 49, we have the whole navigating this whole era of perimenopause into the next leg of the journey, right? And so, of course, there's the whole shifts in the cycle that can show up. And that feels destabilizing to women because they've had a cycle their whole lives. It's been a certain way, right? And you get into this point where it's not doing what it normally did. And that feels very destabilizing because why? Our monthly cycle, it's cyclical, it's patterned, it's rhythmic. When it starts to change things up, we're like, "Wait a minute, hold on. What's going on, body? You're speaking to me and I don't know this language, right?" Oh my. So, here's what I'm looking for. Here's who this work is really for. I want to work with people who are ready to stop swimming upstream. People who have looked around at the collective approach to health and said, I don't want to play in this arena anymore. I'm calling in what I'd like to call the conscious rebuilders, the people who realize they've been trying so hard to fight their bodies when they could just get in the river and flow with their body's wisdom instead. You might be someone who feels conflicted about all the health advice you've gotten over the years. It's overwhelming, but you're not in panic mode. You're just looking at your life, looking for clearer direction. You have some sort of vision for yourself, even if you don't know the exact path. You're going to have obstacles. You're going to have confusion and emotions are going to come up, but you want to be in alliance with the work you're doing instead of at war with yourself. You're someone who's ready to return to nature's way and be yourself. You don't want to keep wrestling with your body like Jacob wrestling with God. Sometimes that wrestling phase is necessary, I will say, because it helps us realize what we need to do. It's that contrast and experience of what we don't want anymore, right? But it's not meant to be permanent. And you're ready to stop the endless root cause hunting and start rebuilding your foundational terrain. You understand that this isn't about perfection. It's about creating resilience. You want to work with your body's innate wisdom instead of trying to override it constantly. This is the deeper work. This requires patience and trust in the process. But for the right people who are truly ready to get in the river and flow instead of continuing to swim upstream and be exhausted, this is the most liberating approach you'll ever experience. Now, my Minerals and Microbes program is evolving. After working with this approach for over a year, I'm updating the structure and investment level. And I do have spots available through August 9th at the current offering. And then it transforms into something that reflects everything I've learned about this work and the level of transformation it creates. So if you're ready to stop fighting yourself and start flowing with your body's wisdom, if you want to understand your terrain instead of just managing symptoms, this might be exactly what you've been looking for. And you can learn more about the Minerals and Microbes program in the link in the show notes below. Please definitely read that. I have spots available through August 9th at the current structure and investment level that you can go read about. And then it's going to evolve to reflect everything I've learned about this deeper work. So here's my invitation to you. Give yourself permission to stop swimming upstream. You don't have to keep fighting your body, chasing root causes, or jumping from practitioner to practitioner, hoping someone else has the magic answer. Your body wants to flow, it wants to heal, it wants to thrive, but it needs you to create the right conditions and then trust the process, just like my garden taught me. Okay. I had to shut my window because there's a big loud truck outside. This is about returning to your natural rhythms, reconnecting with your body's wisdom, and remembering that healing can honestly feel joyful instead of like warfare. In my next episode, I'm going to dive into why you can't rebuild your mineral reserves. For those of you who have been around and doing this whole mineral balancing HTMA work, this is going to tie into everything I talked about today about the terrain and why the foundational approach matters so much. So I am going to be building on this conversation in a future episode in a different way. Until then, I invite you to notice where in your life you might be swimming upstream instead of flowing downstream. What would it feel like to stop biting and start trusting? Thanks for being here, you guys. I appreciate you. I will talk to you next week. Until then, stay wild and well.